When Manhattan resident and mother of two, Sheila Danishefsky, was found dead in her bathtub in December 2009, police ruled her death an accident. However, about 6 months after the incident, suspicions led her family to exhume the woman's body, and then an autopsy revealed shocking new details. They launched a murder investigation. New Yorker Sheila Danishefsky owned a luxury apartment on Manhattan's Upper West Side. The woman was divorcing Rod Covlin at the time, and they were suing for custody of their 2 children, 9-year-old Anna and 3-year-old Miles. The ex-husband lived next door in the same complex, and they saw each other periodically. The relationship between Sheila and Rod was very strained. People who knew Sheila described her as a loving and caring mother who always put her children above everyone else. Everyone also noted her friendly and gentle nature. In addition to her outer and inner beauty, the woman was very intelligent and accomplished in life in all respects. Colleagues described her as a professional in her business. She was a successful Wall Street investment banker with a fortune of several $1 million. Therefore, her sudden and tragic death came as a shock to everyone who knew Sheila. The woman had no enemies at work or in her personal life. At that time, she was single and not in a romantic relationship. Sheila devoted herself to raising her children, which was her top priority in life. On the morning of that tragic day, December 31st, 2009, her daughter Anna woke up first and went to the bathtub. There she found a horrific scene. Her mother's body floating face down in the bathtub. The water around her body was red with blood, and the closet door directly above the bathtub had been ripped off its hinges. Shocked and frightened, the girl ran out of the tub and ran to the phone. She dialed her father's number and reported that something bad had happened to her mom. A man living nearby quickly rushed to the apartment. He entered the bathroom and found that his wife was unconscious. Rod notified 911 and emergency services were dispatched to the address. In the meantime, the man took Sheila's body out of the bathtub, covered her with a blanket, and tried to give her CPR as instructed by the operator, hoping to resuscitate the woman, but it didn't work. By then, the apartment had already been visited by medics. The door the girl opened. Her father was in the bathtub and did not give up trying to save Sheila. Medics checked her pulse. There was none. The body was already cold. Medics stated the death of a 47-year-old woman, as the body showed the first signs of rigor mortis. It was determined that death had occurred about an hour ago. Rod was grief-stricken. He was crying with his children and was very worried about what had happened. The medics even had to sedate him. The police officers, once on the scene, took a close look at the bathtub. They paid attention to the broken cabinet door and assumed that it was the reason for the tragedy. The woman, while in the tub, reached for the cabinet. Sheila slipped, fell, hit her head on the tub, lost consciousness, and drowned. The woman had lost a lot of blood due to her head injury, and that explained the red color of the water. It all looked like an accident. The police also checked that there were no signs of breaking and entering the house. Nothing was missing. All valuables were in their places. And overall, the incident did not look like a crime, so the case was closed as an accident. Because the death was ruled an accident, Sheila's family cited their religious beliefs and asked that no autopsy be performed. The woman was buried, but immediately after the funeral, serious doubts began to surround her shocking and sudden death. Sheila's loved ones began to believe that her death was not an accident and someone was responsible. Sheila, because of time constraints, never took a bath with water. She bathed under the shower. Therefore, they had no way of explaining why her body was found in a bathtub full of water. The relatives also recalled that the day before her death, Sheila had had keratin straightening of her hair, which she had always done before, in which case she was not allowed to wet her hair for the first 3 days. The woman was certainly aware of this and did not deviate from following the rules. Therefore, she would definitely not bathe in a bathtub. It all went against her habits and couldn't be true. The suspicions became so strong that the relatives asked the police to start an investigation into Sheila's death and requested that her body be exhumed. At first, the police did not take these requests seriously because everything seemed obvious. The woman fell in the bathtub, hit her head, and died, but relatives managed to convince detectives to conduct an autopsy on the body. The body of the deceased was exhumed in April 2010 and sent for autopsy. This is where it was discovered that the woman had been strangled before her body was placed in the bathtub. The forensic expert determined that the victim had been strangled with such force that her hyoid bone was broken and several ribs were also broken. The head trauma was not serious and could not have caused death. It looked like the woman died as a result of a violent struggle for life during a chokehold. The perpetrator may have been into martial arts and performed the hold. In addition, a forensic medical examiner who examined photos of the deceased noted fresh bruises on her arms and severe bruising in her eyes. In light of the new circumstances, law enforcement officials had no choice but to launch an investigation into Sheila's murder. The investigation of the crime was complicated by the fact that it had been months since the tragedy, and since no one thought her death was a homicide, there was no evidence to work with at the scene. Detectives only had a few photos taken by police officers arriving on the call for a report. Investigators believed that in so many months, all traces had clearly been destroyed during the bathroom cleanup. But despite great doubts, they couldn't help but check. Police officers arrived at the dead woman's apartment for an inspection. It turned out that her children and husband lived there. He graciously allowed the detectives to enter and look around. The CSIs went to the bathroom and, as expected, found absolutely nothing there. Rod said that after the death, the bathroom was thoroughly cleaned several times with a cleaning agent to scrub away all the blood that embarrassed the children and caused them painful memories of their mother. The man was authorized to do this by police officers who were at the apartment on the day of the death. There were no witnesses to the crime. The only people in the apartment were young children who were interviewed, but they did not see or hear anything suspicious. It was noted to investigators that there were no signs of forced entry in the house. So, the perpetrator either got into the apartment with his key or had the door opened for him. The woman probably knew her killer, so they assumed it was someone close to her. After talking to the deceased's loved ones, detectives learned that Shele had no enemies or ill-wishers, but had problems with her ex-husband, with whom she had a bitter dispute over divorce and child custody. Shele and Rod met in 1998 while working on Wall Street. The woman was already successful at that time. Her career was booming and she was already a vice president of a major financial company. Rod was a novice investment trader who had just entered the field. But despite this, Shele and Rod immediately fell in love with each other. The couple began a stormy romance, and after just a couple of months they got married. Everyone around was surprised at such a rapid development of events. Some even advised Sheila not to rush into marriage and to take a closer look at the newcomer to the market, who was too quick to win her heart. Acquaintances suspected him of insincerity, but Sheila was blinded by love and listened to no one. The newlyweds went to live in the woman's luxurious apartment in the upscale Upper West Side neighborhood near Central Park. Soon they had a daughter, who was named Anna. Sheila could not sit in maternity leave for a long time, so she was forced to go to work and hired a nanny to help her. Shele went on to have a successful career and run a company. Meanwhile, Rod could not achieve any success in this activity, despite the help of his wife. In the end, he simply abandoned the job and began to pursue his hobby. Rod was fond of martial arts, received a black belt, and participated in competitions. He convinced his wife that he saw his future in sports, where he could achieve great success and become a coach. His wife believed him. Then the man switched to backgammon and then to other hobbies, which he constantly changed. He was infantile. All this time, the man sat on his wife's neck and sometimes begged money from his parents. The couple had a second child, a son. It seemed that they were happy, but in fact, Rod hid his double life from his wife. In addition to engaging in various hobbies, the man walked on the side. At first, he had one girl, then two. But gradually, he got into all sorts of things. In his address book, there were about 20 girls with whom he constantly met. The man even had to make a schedule of dates on his computer to avoid confusion. He found himself new companions on the internet, did not muffle even meetings with girls of easy behavior. Rod told them all that he was a successful banker from Wall Street, and the girls themselves hung around his neck, hoping to get such a solid fiancé. At home, in his relations with his wife, he behaved insultingly, humiliated his wife in every possible way, and brought her to tears. But his lies could not be endless, and one day they were exposed. The man was exposed by his own wife, who for some time suspected him of cheating. She hired a private detective who gathered all the information about him. It turned out that the amorous Rod simultaneously communicated on the internet with 860 girls. The man did not even refute this information. He admitted to his wife that he could not be faithful only to her, although he stated that he loved her and she suited him for a life together. He offered her a free relationship, to which the wife responded with a categorical refusal. She got tired of tolerating all his antics and filed for divorce. In April 2009, the The woman kicked her husband out of the apartment and rented him an apartment not far from home out of pity, because he had nowhere to live, although she later regretted this decision. After the move, Rod realized that in the event of a divorce, he would lose all his assets and the lavish lifestyle he was so accustomed to. Without money, all his new girlfriends would no longer be interested in him. So he began threatening Sheila that he would take his wife's children away from her and pursue her in the event of a divorce. The woman didn't want any trouble and was thinking how she could solve the problem with her ex to get him off her back. She offered him a $250,000 payoff, but her husband rejected her offer and demanded more money and full custody of the children. Rod intentionally threatened and manipulated Sheila with what was most important to her in life, her children, even though she knew full well that he was never interested in the children. Sheila's lawyer advised her not to enter into any negotiations with him. He was sure that with their evidence, the court would be on their side anyway. Sheila's ignorance made Rod even angrier, and he moved into action. He first informed his wife's workplace that she was taking illegal substances. Although everyone knew this was untrue, Sheila's supervisor could not help but react to this information and sent her to get tested. The result was that she was not taking anything. When this plan did not work, the man wrote the next denunciation of his spouse to the tax office. But even this check showed that she was clean before the law. Then he began to visit his wife's apartment, having his own set of keys, and began to arrange various mischief there for the former. Then he filed a complaint against his wife for molesting his 3-year-old son. As a result, the boy was referred to a child psychologist, who confirmed that nothing of the sort had happened. Sheila was on the verge of a nervous breakdown because of the problems her ex was causing, and as a result, her lawyer in court found the man guilty of slander, and he was banned from communicating with his children and wife. The wife obtained a restraining order against Rod. A couple of days before her death, Sheila wrote to her lawyer and expressed her desire to change her will, to completely cut out her ex-husband, who was to receive $4 million. As a result, she wanted to leave her entire fortune to her children. They agreed that the lawyer would make all the appropriate changes to the documents, and the woman would come in and sign them on January 1st. But Sheila didn't have time to do that. She died literally within a day, which seemed strange. The suspicions of her relatives about Sheila's murder were connected precisely with the strange behavior of her ex. They claimed that the woman was very afraid of Rod. The nanny said that she often heard Rod insulting her spouse, being irascible and aggressive. Once she saw him push her and Sheila fell. The nanny was afraid to imagine how abusive the man behaved toward the deceased when she wasn't home. Investigators by then were also leaning toward the husband being behind Sheila's murder because he was the only one with a motive for the crime. Having access to her correspondences, the man learned that Sheila was planning to remove him from the will, and he couldn't let that happen and decided to act. His wife's death was extremely lucrative for him. He would receive an inheritance and a hefty $1 million life insurance policy on her life. In addition, the police knew he had a key and could easily break into his ex's apartment, kill her, and leave the premises unharmed. Detectives were amazed at how insensitive a person you have to be to leave your young children alone with their dead mother and let them find her body, to see the most horrible picture of their lives. Sheila's daughter was still seeing a psychologist for a long time because of the psychological trauma she had suffered. But unfortunately, there was no direct evidence against him, no DNA or fingerprints. This case could have been quite controversial in court. Because of this, police officers were hesitant to arrest him and press charges. So the investigation continued. Sheila's insurance and inheritance were suspended during the investigation. A new custody trial for the deceased's children also began. Rod wanted to get custody so that he could have access to his wife's finances through the children, but her parents were adamantly opposed to this. They didn't want to allow an Alfonso to have access to the money of a woman they thought had died through his fault. In addition, they knew from Shell's words that Rod did not like children, treated them badly, and often beat them. This was confirmed by the children themselves. At this trial, even his parents opposed Rod, who accused their son of abusing the children and stealing $80,000 from them. As a result, custody of the children was given to the parents of the deceased. Meanwhile, Rod was abandoned by everyone, and for the first time he was forced to provide for himself, having no means of subsistence. The man got a job as a debt collector and started going door to door to collect debts. Among other things, by force and his aggression, he instilled fear in debtors who complained about him. In the end, his career never took off, and Rod was fired. As time passed, the police had no solid evidence against the husband. This case could have remained unsolved if in 2015, one of Rod's former lovers had not contacted the police. The woman decided to finally turn in her former lover and tell her that he confessed to her about the murder of his spouse. According to her, Rod was very greedy for his wife's money, and because of this reason, he decided to kill. He was indifferent to the children, but he tried to get custody of them too, because of mercantile interest. The woman also shocked all the detectives with new information. Rod planned to kill Shele's parents, leaving their death as an accident, and thus regain custody and get access to his dead wife's money. But all his plans failed one by one. Then he started thinking of involving his daughter, who was a teenager at the time, in the realization of the plan. He tried to convince her that charges of harassment should be brought against her grandfather. But the girl categorically refused to participate in this. To prove her words, the former mistress presented the police with voice messages sent to her from Rod's cell phone. Now, the police had new evidence. Based on the testimony of his mistress and these reports, Rod was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife in November 2015. This news came as a blow to Rod, who was confident of his impunity and planned to get away with murdering his wife, taking all her millions with him. The trial began in 2019. At the trial, Rod denied all the allegations against him. He denied that he planned the murder, was in his wife's apartment that morning, killed her, and planned to kill her parents to get close to the money. On the prosecution side, there were numerous witnesses who spoke with one voice about Rod's abuse of his wife and children, as well as his affairs on the left and his intentions to gain access to all of his wife's money and lose control of the situation in the event of a divorce. According to the prosecutor, the defendant was motivated to get rid of his wife for money. He had a key to the apartment. He knew how to do a chokehold, which was used to kill her. Sheila, though, there was no direct evidence against the family in the case, but there was enough circumstantial evidence. A mistress appeared at the trial and testified against Rod. This finally convinced the jury that he was guilty. Rod encouraged them to ask the court not to send their father to prison, given that the children had already lost one parent and did not want to lose the other. The 12-year-old son spoke at the trial, and the 18-year-old daughter, though absent, relayed a plea to feel sorry for her father. However, these requests did not move the jury. They were found guilty. Rod was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. On May 13, 2015, one of the country's most horrific murders took place in the city of Cochabamba, Bolivia. On this day, 2 members of the Adria Zola family were brutally murdered. No doubt the entire country was in shock. But the more disturbing information in this case was who committed these crimes. Gloria Adria Zola was born in 1992 in the city of Cochabamba in northern Bolivia. She grew up with her parents, Omar Fernando Adria Zola and Gloria Bustamante, as well as her sister Peggy, who was almost 10 years older than her, and her younger brother Omar, who was born just 3 years after her. People close to the family say that Gloria and Fernando raised their children according to their values and respect. The mother was a short but physically and emotionally strong woman who devoted herself to sowing and growing flowers on a plot of land she owned. And Fernando was a taekwondo instructor, an expert in the sport who had achieved black belt. He saw taekwondo not only as a method of self-defense, but also as a means of instilling discipline, responsibility, and maturity. This is why he was able to pass on his passion to his family, especially his children, Gloria and Omar. Peggy, who majored in pharmacy, was unable to play sports due to partial cerebral palsy that prevented her from moving the left side of her body. Gloria and Omar were very similar not only in appearance but also shared a passion for taekwondo. Gradually, they managed to pass exams and bouts, which allowed them to obtain a black belt like their father. They then also became instructors in the same club. Gloria became famous not only as an athlete, but also as a wonderful person. Her teammates and students appreciated her for being cheerful and finding the good in everything. To pay for Gloria's travel to the international tournaments in which she participated, the club sold refreshments, organized raffles, lunches, and whatever else was needed to help. In sports, the girl stood out for her great elasticity, control of movements, and skill, thanks to which she managed to qualify as the only Bolivian athlete selected to represent her country in the 2015 Pan American Games.
the 23-year-old national champion, was counting the days until this trip and dreamed of bringing home a gold medal for her country. But unfortunately, Gloria's dreams were cut short by the tragedy that shook her country. Omar, who was only 20 years old, was an instructor at the Pantes Club and martial arts gym. He also combined sports with his studies at medical school. He often posted photos and videos of his training sessions with Gloria on his social media accounts. Anyone who saw these photos could tell that brother and sister were almost inseparable and supportive of each other. However, deep down, Omar was jealous and envious of his sister because she had become a national champion. Although he worked much harder, she was the one who had the most success. He also felt that his parents favored her over him, as they constantly bought her clothes and praised her successes. Only his girlfriend, Alejandra Saavedra, knew about the resentment growing in him. She met Omar when she was 17, enrolled in the Taekwondo Academy, where he was a teacher. The girl fell madly in love with him, and they started a relationship. However, this did not meet with approval from the family of both young men. Omar was reportedly aggressive. He humiliated her and insulted her ego. This behavior caused Alejandra to become depressed, as a result of which she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for a few days to relieve stress and get out of this state. However, after leaving the hospital, the couple got back together, despite the fact that their families were not in agreement. That's how we got to October 2014. That's when Omar, who was sick of his family trying to interfere in his life and constantly making him feel inferior in front of his sister Gloria, started devising a plan to get rid of everyone with the help of his lover. In front of relatives and acquaintances, the young people pretended to end the relationship. Omar even began dating a teenager named Ariana. However, he and Alejandra continued to communicate, talk on the phone, and secretly see each other. The reason that prompted Omar to get rid of the family was not only envy and jealousy of his sister, but also material, as he wanted to open a cafe with his girlfriend, but did not have enough capital. He thought that with his parents and sisters gone, he would be the sole heir to the house, wagon, old car, land, and money. He also wanted to get his sister Gloria, who by then had already established herself as a champion athlete. Although Peggy was not a danger because of her paralysis, he felt that taking care of her would be a burden to him, so he had to get rid of her too. Gradually, Omar convinced Alejandra to help him develop a plan so that they could start a new life together, without facing anyone who was against their relationship. And on May 13, 2015, the couple decided to put their plan into action. That afternoon, Omar and Alejandra bought 5 animal sedation drugs at the veterinary center and agreed to meet in the evening. The girl then went to her classes at the university, where she bought disposable surgical gloves that she would use to avoid leaving fingerprints. At 8:30 p.m., she arrived at Omar's house and they walked together to his room, where she hid behind a curtain. According to court records, the girl crushed the pills and gave them to the boyfriend, who slipped them into the hot chocolate his mother had made for the family. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, but the mother did not drink the drink, as she came tired from the field and fell asleep on the sofa. When she woke up, her husband told her that he felt very ill and then passed out. The woman panicked and asked her daughters to call Omar. Gloria went to look for him in the bedroom, but it was locked. Omar entered the room a few minutes later, and with the help of Gloria and their mother, they took Fernando to the hospital. Peggy stayed home, sitting in a chair and watching television. Apparently, while the doctors were treating Fernando, the sedative in the drink began to take effect on Gloria, who told her mother that she was very sleepy. Her mother suggested that she sleep in the car while they waited for the results of her father's tests, but she did not want to. So the woman asked her son to take her home. Once there, Gloria immediately went to her room, took off her jacket, and went out into the yard, possibly to go to the bathroom. At that moment, Omar attacked her from behind and tried to strangle her with his hand. The girl fell to the ground, but despite her drowsiness, managed to get up and tried to defend herself. Her brother hit her hard in the face, causing her to lose a tooth. Taking advantage of her defenselessness, Omar and Alejandra attacked her with a sharp object. In the midst of the attack, still retaining her strength and wanting to defend herself, Gloria grabbed the girl's hair, ripping out several strands. After being stabbed more than 20 times, the girl fell to the ground in agony, and Omar went to his parents' room and stole 200 bolivianos, which is about $30, which he gave to Alejandra to pretend the whole thing was a robbery. According to some versions, Peggy was killed by the couple following Gloria, while others claim that the murder of the older sister was committed by Alejandra with a sharp object she picked up in the kitchen before Omar returned from the hospital. The truth is that after the sisters were dead, Omar received a call from his mother asking him to bring his father's papers because the doctors had decided to hospitalize Fernando due to a heart arrhythmia. The boy immediately changed his clothes and put the blood-stained clothes and shoes in the washing machine. He told Alejandra that he had to go to the hospital and advised her to leave quickly so as not to arouse suspicion. However, the girl stayed behind, trying to clean up the evidence. She put in her backpack the cell phone, computer, and knives used in the crime. Meanwhile, Omar's mother waited at the hospital for her son to arrive. Minutes passed, but he did not arrive, so she took a cab to her house to pick up the documents herself. As she pulled up, 56-year-old Gloria asked the cab driver to wait for her, as she only wanted to pick up the documents and return to the hospital immediately. As she entered the courtyard, she saw a skinny girl get up from the ground and run to her son's bedroom. Gloria thought it was Ariana, and at that moment she didn't give it much thought. When she entered the house, she saw her daughter lying in the backyard. Her face and clothes were covered in blood. She immediately began screaming and trying to bring her to her senses. When she saw that she was unresponsive, she ran to Omar's room to look for the girl she had seen a few minutes ago, but she didn't seem to be there anymore. Gloria walked on. Just then, the door slammed shut. At that moment, she saw that it was Alejandra, who immediately put the key in the bedroom door and leaned against it to keep the woman out. Gloria noticed that she had bloody gloves on her hands. Fearing for her life, she tried to reach for the key to get out of the bedroom, but Alejandra grabbed her hands. At this point, a fight broke out between the two, during which the woman begged to be let out to see her daughter. Then, thinking Peggy could hear her, Gloria began yelling at her older daughter to call the police, but Alejandra told her she couldn't hear her. The woman screamed even louder, but got no response. Fearing the worst, she gathered her strength and grabbed Alejandra by the hair until she fell to the floor. As they struggled, 200 Bolivianos fell out of the girl's pants pockets, which Gloria said had been stolen from her closet. To get out of the room, the woman had to kick down the door. As she walked further into the house, she noticed that Peggy was also dead. Gloria then tied Alejandra with a rope, pulling her toward the door. She then yelled for help to neighbors, who immediately ran in and called the police. Omar returned to the house around 4 a.m. and found his accomplice under the protection of her mother and a group of residents. 2 female police officers then arrived at the family's home. Upon entering the home, the officers were confronted with 2 gruesome scenes, so they called homicide investigators for backup. First, they discovered 32-year-old Peggy in the living room. She had 5 stab wounds on her chest and 4 on her neck. A forensic medical examination later determined that the wounds were between 1 and 5 centimeters in diameter. The victim's trachea, thyroid gland, and neck vessels were completely severed. She also sustained injuries to her lungs, chest, and left rib, resulting in hemorrhaging and subsequent death. In the yard of the house, lying on her back, was Gloria's lifeless body. There were 20 stab wounds on her body, particularly on her neck. She also had bruises on her eyebrow, lower lip, left foot, and the front of her right rib. She was also missing a tooth, indicating that the young athlete had been beaten and probably stabbed by a second attacker. That was the police's version of events. Investigators then conducted a search of the crime scene. In the room, in the corner behind the door, they found a bloody glove and a backpack belonging to Alejandra. It contained 2 knives, both blood-stained, a black knife handle with no blade, 2 surgical caps, a laptop, a tablet, a cell phone, women's blue pants, a black jacket, a white robe, and a snakeskin purse containing another knife. All of the rooms were in disarray. The parents' closet was broken into, and several bills were scattered on the floor. Investigators believe the double murder was planned, as the killers wanted the attack to look like the result of a botched robbery. However, things did not work out as they had hoped, as the unexpected arrival of the victim's mother caused the men to make mistakes that later became evidence of their guilt. At the beginning, only Alejandra was arrested and charged with double murder, but her lawyers thought it was impossible that she could kill the national taekwondo champion alone, as Alejandra was only 155 centimeters tall and weighed 37 kilograms. But for some reason, the girl refused to extradite Omar. She didn't want him to go to prison. According to the first version she gave to the officers, she called Omar that evening, who told her that his father was being taken to the hospital.
She became concerned and went to the family home where she found the door open. According to her, when she entered, she saw Gloria's bloody body. And just as she was trying to help the girl, her mother arrived and a fight broke out. While Alejandra tried to evade responsibility and cover for her boyfriend, he did everything he could to place the blame solely on her. In his first interview with police, Omar said that on the night of May 13th, he had arranged to go to his new girlfriend Ariana's house to watch a movie. But around 11 p.m., his sister Gloria told him that their father was not feeling well, and he joined her and his mother in taking him to the hospital. In the emergency room, his mother told them to go home and rest because Gloria wanted to sleep. He indicated that when they arrived at the house, his mother called him and asked him to bring his father's papers and a blanket because they were going to leave Fernando for observation. Omar said he parked the car on the street because he had to go to the hospital again, and Gloria went to the house to get the papers. According to him, his sister spent about 6 minutes looking for it, but returned with only a blanket, reporting that she could not find her father's ID card. When Gloria went into the house to look again, he noticed the document was in the car and without saying a word to her, left for the hospital. He said when he arrived at the medical facility, he didn't find his mother there. A nurse then told Omar that he had to go up to his father's room to help him go to the bathroom. The boy claimed that he was with Fernando until about 4 a.m. when he received a call from a neighbor informing him that his sisters had died and his mother was heartbroken. After that, he immediately drove home. On May 15th, 20-year-old Alejandra appeared in court as the prime suspect in the double crime. At the hearing, the prosecutor presented several pieces of evidence implicating her in the crime, including hair on Gloria's right arm, a backpack belonging to her with 2 bloody knives, as well as a cell phone allegedly belonging to the victim's father, surgical gloves, and some personal items. After evaluating the evidence, the judge ordered her pretrial detention in jail. A few days after these events, on May 22nd, the case took an unexpected turn when Omar was arrested by the public prosecutor's office on suspicion of having planned and carried out the murder of his sisters, together with Alejandra. He was charged as the organizer and author of the double crime and sent to prison. Apparently, he was incriminated by several pieces of evidence, including the confession of Alejandra, who realized that her lover was seeking to incriminate her and decided to tell her version of events. The defendant told authorities that Omar was jealous of his sister Gloria because, although they were both athletes, she was the one who always won prizes in competitions. Another aspect that Alejandra said bothered Omar was the alleged distribution of inheritance in the family. The land in the countryside had been told by his mother to him and his sisters that it would be divided into 4 equal parts between parents and children. But Omar wanted all the land for his projects. Alejandra added that Omar intended to stage a robbery of his house and that she overheard his plans but did not alert the family as she thought he was saying it to blow off steam and did not see it as a real possibility. According to her, she met with Omar on May 13 and he allegedly told her he wanted to go on a trip with his dogs and needed to get sedatives for them. They went to the vet and there they were recommended 3 sedatives, but Omar decided to buy 5. The couple said goodbye and arranged to meet at the university to study and then spend the night together. Alejandra revealed that Omar refused to meet her and she called him to find out why. He responded in a rude manner that his father was in the hospital. She said she was concerned about the man's health and went to the family's house at around 1 a.m. When she arrived, she said, she saw the front door half open, and when she entered, she found Gloria's body lying in the yard, covered in blood. Alejandra said she thought about helping her, but that's when she saw Omar. She asked him what happened, and he threatened to do the same to her mother and brothers if she said anything. After that, he left the house and she started the family car to try to help Gloria. According to her, when she went to see if she was alive, her mother arrived, beat her, and dragged her into a room where she passed out. And when she woke up, she was wearing bloody gloves. The defendant claimed that knives and other items from the house had been planted in her backpack. The police chief noted that in addition to Alejandra's testimony, elements were found that prove Omar's direct involvement in the murder. Among this evidence are the clothes and shoes that the boy changed after leaving his parents in the hospital, which were found in the washing machine with traces of blood. Investigators also relied on surveillance video at a veterinary store that captured Omar and Alejandra buying sedative pills. Although the boyfriend denied having a relationship with his ex-girlfriend, they suspected that the couple had decided to sedate Fernando and Gloria because they were strong and could defeat them in any attack. It was also confirmed that the two were still in a romantic relationship, and it was suspected that the crime was committed because of money. In addition, Omar entered into a number of contradictions during the interrogations. Despite the evidence against him, he assured that he was not guilty, demanded justice for his sisters, and confirmed his version by pointing to Alejandra as the sole perpetrator of the double crime, as she was the only one seen at the scene of the crime. Alejandra and Omar continued to accuse each other, but the police stuck to the hypothesis that they both planned and executed the scheme together. While all of this evidence was mere speculation to the attorneys for both sides, the real evidence emerged when information was cross-checked against surveillance camera schedules, phone calls, text messages, and radio bases that showed the geographic location of the suspects' phones. The evidence also showed that the bloodstains found on Omar and Alejandra's clothing belonged to the victims. Another piece of evidence was a mark from a pair of sneakers found at the crime scene that matched the boyfriend's shoes that were in the washing machine, which disproved Omar's claim that he did not enter the house until 4 a.m., when he was already wearing different clothes. Over the following months, the prosecution continued to collect evidence, and after ascertaining that the necessary evidence of guilt against both defendants was present, decided to bring the case to trial, which began on February 22, 2016. In support of its charges, the prosecution presented more than 40 pieces of evidence against the suspects and the testimony of 48 people. Finally, after a 3-hour deliberation, on March 17th of the same year, Alejandra Saavedra and Omar Adria Zola were found guilty of double murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole. Upon hearing the verdict, Alejandra and her family wept bitterly, while Omar remained silent with his head down. He then hugged his aunt, who had accompanied him throughout the trial.
Love is a wonderful feeling. When you start dating someone, you often mentally gauge whether you could spend your entire life with them. If the answer is no, it's best not to prolong the relationship, as you never know what's going on in the other person's mind. Valerie Reyes met a young man and then entered into a relationship that cost her her life. The most unusual aspect of this entire case is that the girl predicted her own demise. Valerie Reyes was born on April 1, 1994, in New Rochelle, New York, to Sal and Norma. She had an older brother and 2 younger siblings. As the only daughter, Valerie shared a close bond with her mother, who nurtured her passionate love for all things related to art. Her creative personality shone through in everything she did. Valerie was a gentle, compassionate, and selfless girl who truly worked hard for what she wanted to achieve in life. From childhood, she was very homely, loved to read extensively, and preferred spending her free time not at parties, but with close friends and family. After graduating from high school in 2012, Valerie enrolled at New Rochelle College, where she made many new friends. Acquaintances described her as a happy, loving, and genuinely kind person. The Reyes family was very tight-knit, with one day a week, Sunday, considered their family day. Valerie always eagerly anticipated the weekends. They would all gather together and have fun playing board games, going for walks in the park, or visiting a family-friendly cafe. Valerie continued to goof around and have fun with her younger brothers, even though she herself had long since outgrown childhood. Around them, she transformed into a laughing, carefree, and mischievous girl. The rest of the time, she worked at a bookstore located in a shopping mall in East Chester. She enjoyed this job because of the opportunity to read and recommend books to customers. She could share a great deal about literature of various genres and styles. Even when visiting a cafe, Valerie was always reading. She loved singing in her apartment, taking long walks, going on hiking trips. But her true passion was art and creative self-expression. Valerie drew portraits of her friends and classmates and aspired to become a tattoo artist like her older brother, adorning clients' bodies with her own unique designs. Her dream was to open her own tattoo parlor, and she tirelessly worked towards achieving this distant goal. Previously, Valerie simply allowed her brother to practice tattooing on her, but then she unexpectedly fell in love with this art form herself. She had the soul of an artist. Overall, Valerie was a positive person, although she periodically struggled with bouts of anxiety and depression. Creativity and self-expression helped her overcome these states. Around January 2018,
Valerie met a man named Javier on a website. The young couple dated for only about 3 months before breaking up in April 2018. Javier was more interested in the relationship than Valerie herself, which she told her friends. The girl saw no future in this short-term romance. Tension grew between them, and the student chose not to torment herself or the guy, suggesting they part ways. The enamored Javier was unwilling to accept reality and continued to call and write to her, devising various reasons to do so. In September 2018, a few months after the breakup, he messaged Valerie, saying he wanted to reimburse some money allegedly taken from her card. Apparently, Javier had somehow accidentally used her debit card information for an online purchase, and now wanted to refund the amount he had spent. How this happened is unknown. Whether Valerie gave him this card herself, or the data remained on the computer from when they were dating. The girl was already tired of Javier constantly seeking reasons to communicate, so she planned to ask her friend to deal with the money issue to avoid giving her ex-boyfriend any unnecessary opportunities. After this incident, the guy seemed to finally understand that everything was over between them and calmed down for a while. For several months, there was no word from him. By that time, Valerie had turned 24. She lived alone in a rented basement apartment in New Rochelle. Given her previous psychological states, living in solitude did not boost her self-confidence. Panic attacks and anxiety began to return more frequently. The girl had been living alone for quite some time, but in recent weeks, she had started to worry more and feel paranoid due to the absence of loved ones nearby. The day before, on Sunday, Valerie spent the entire day with her family. Everything was going wonderfully, and there were no reasons for concern. At least, that's how it seemed from the outside. But on Monday, January 28, 2019, Valerie called her mother in a panic, claiming that she felt like she was going to die soon, that her life would be taken. It's impossible to imagine what Norma felt when she heard such words from her daughter. Valerie sounded so frightened, as if there were some real omens of what she was talking about. Such a sudden change in her mood and thoughts was not accidental. Norma knew that just 5 days ago, her daughter had broken up with yet another boyfriend and was clearly upset by everything happening in her life. The woman did her best to calm her daughter, inviting her to come to the family home if she felt so lonely. However, Valerie, without properly explaining anything, hastened to end the conversation. Norma decided that the best thing to do at the moment was simply to let her daughter rest. In any case, they planned to meet the next day and go shopping together, so she wished Valerie all the best, said a few encouraging words, and, amid the daily hustle and bustle, put the conversation out of her mind. Later that same evening, Valerie sent her mother a message, wishing her a good night and reassuring her that she was feeling better. In addition to Norma, she was texting with her best friend, Jeffrey Anderson. They had been friends for almost 10 years, and Valerie also told him about her worries. After talking it out, the girl indeed felt a certain boost in energy and mood, and since she needed to get up for work in the morning, she went to bed. On Tuesday, January 29th, Norma planned to meet with her daughter in the afternoon, but she did not respond to calls or messages. The woman did not endlessly call, assuming that as soon as Valerie came to her senses, she would dial her mother's number herself and explain everything. The woman was not too worried, thinking that her daughter must have fallen asleep because she had been nervous the day before and now simply turned off her phone so as not to be disturbed. Norma did not know that her daughter had not shown up for work that day. No call came from her on Tuesday or Wednesday. The girl did not respond to friends or relatives and missed another shift at the bookstore. Skipping workdays without any explanation was not at all in Valerie's character, so the department management also thoroughly tried to reach the girl. That's when Norma remembered how on Monday night, her daughter was experiencing some strange anxiety about her own life. The mother began to suspect that something odd was happening. All calls were now being forwarded directly to voicemail, and when the woman found out that her daughter had not shown up at the bookstore for 2 days, she became genuinely frightened. After the parents reported Valerie's disappearance to the New Rochelle Police Department, photographs of the girl and a description of her distinguishing features were distributed throughout the area. Such hasty actions were the result of several recent attacks on women in the vicinity where Valerie lived, which ended quite dismally. The first thing the police did was visit Valerie's apartment, where they found no signs of a struggle or break-in, but everywhere there were noticeable random tiny specks of blood on the pillowcases, in the toilet, and on the bathroom floor. This did not arouse any suspicions, as the smallest splatters could have remained after cutting a small frame while brushing teeth, or perhaps the girl had started bleeding. The detectives were alerted by something else. Valerie's phone, iPad, wallet, some of her clothes, and a small pillow were missing from the apartment. The first thing that came to the investigators' minds was that the girl had run away. Perhaps she had gotten involved in something criminal or was hiding from someone. That's how the police reasoned, but the parents categorically disagreed with this assumption. They were 100% sure that Valerie would have notified them of her departure in any case. She would never have just left, making them worry about her. Norma told the police about her daughter's anxious thoughts before her disappearance. The girl believed that someone wanted her dead. Now the woman was berating herself for not properly questioning Valerie about the origin of such thoughts in her head. She thought it might be somehow related to her daughter's personal life and the recent breakup. Therefore, Valerie's ex-boyfriend, whom she had broken up with a few days earlier, was the first to come under suspicion. However, the guy was soon excluded from the list because he actively participated in the search for his girlfriend and had an alibi. Over the next few days, the police, along with the Reyes family and friends of the missing girl, turned to social media users for help, and the response was immediate. One of Valerie's friends reported seeing her near the New Rochelle train station a couple of days ago. The student was wearing a dark green coat, black jeans, and black shoes. Another message claimed that Valerie was spotted in Manhattan. Others said they had encountered a similar-looking girl in one of the city's bars. The police checked each lead and found that none of these statements were true. To understand where the young girl could have actually gone, the police decided to track the activity on her bank account. Soon they discovered that money had been withdrawn from Valerie's debit card at several ATMs in New Rochelle, totaling over $10,000. The police requested surveillance camera footage from the bank at the ATMs, but it would take time to verify the girl's movement pattern that morning. In one of the recordings, detectives found a girl matching Valerie's description. She was caught on a surveillance camera near the bank early in the morning of January 30th. The footage was shown to her mother, Norma, who confirmed that the stranger did indeed resemble her daughter in some way, and a seed of hope sprouted in the mother's heart. Photos of the girl were posted in the media with a request to report any known details about her whereabouts. It was also mentioned that Valerie had recently been suffering from anxiety and depression. Despite numerous public appeals, no new information on the case was received. The police had absolutely no leads in the Valerie Reyes case for a week, and on February 5th, 2019, she was found. A group of workers in Greenwich, Connecticut around 8 a.m. were performing routine road work in a wooded area, about 10 miles from Valerie's home. One of them noticed a red-orange suitcase several meters from the main road. This suitcase looked suspicious. It was lying in a forested area and did not resemble an old, worn-out item that had been discarded as unnecessary. Moreover, it was clearly not empty. One of the workers' curiosity got the better of reason. He approached the suitcase with the intention of opening it and looking inside. When the man unzipped it, he was immediately turned inside out by the terrible smell seeping out. The other workers immediately dialed the police station. When the investigative team arrived at the scene, they opened the suitcase and found the body of a young woman inside. She was dressed in a shirt and jeans. The shirt was unbuttoned. The victim's shoes were missing. The girl's knees and ankles were bound. Her wrists were also tied with tape, and the victim's mouth and chin were wrapped in several layers of duct tape. Multiple injuries to the face and head indicated that before placing the body in the suitcase, the victim had been severely beaten. The nose and cheekbones were broken, and the skull was fractured. One side of the face was a solid bruise. The body hidden in the suitcase had already begun to decompose. This meant that the girl found had been dead for at least several days. The body was sent to the forensic laboratory,
and the next day it was established that the cause of death was strangulation. To confirm the identity of the deceased, Valerie's father and older brother were invited to the morgue. The male half of the family decided to shield Norma from the horrific sight they were about to see. The men had no doubts that it was Valerie lying before them, even though the girl was difficult to recognize due to her injuries. But this was not the full horror that the Reyes family had to endure. It was later discovered that one of the road workers had photographed the body of the beaten and strangled Valerie when investigators opened the suitcase. He began showing the photo to all his acquaintances, recounting the terrible find he and his crew had discovered in the wooded area near the main road. This person clearly did not think that the picture would sooner or later reach those who knew the victim. The worst that could be expected happened. The image of Valerie Reyes nearly made it to the media because this worker called the editorial office of a news magazine and offered to publish the crime scene photo. The Department of Public Works, where this man worked upon learning of the situation, sent him on administrative leave while they investigated the incident. In the end, they had to make a public apology for the thoughtless and insensitive behavior of their employee, although at that point it was the last thing Valerie's family needed. After Valerie was declared missing, the police tracked her banking activity. It was discovered that the first cash withdrawal occurred on January 29th around 5 a.m., just a few hours after Valerie's conversation with her mother. Detectives managed to find footage from a surveillance camera at one of the ATMs, showing a man dressed in black pants and a black hooded sweatshirt, completely covering his face, withdrawing the money. The ATM surveillance camera also captured his vehicle. Using the license plate number, they were able to track down the owner of the car. It turned out that the Honda vehicle had been rented for only 2 days, January 28th and 29, and it was rented by none other than Valerie's ex-boyfriend, Javier, whom she had dated for only 3 months and had broken up with last year. Over the next few days, after the girl's disappearance, he made several more cash withdrawals from Valerie's bank card. So who exactly is Javier? Javier Enrico de Chilo Rojas was born on January 3, 1995. He was originally from Venezuela and held dual citizenship with Portugal. In 2017, he moved to the United States using a special document that allowed residents from a very small list of countries to stay in the U.S. for 90 days without an official visa. At that time, Venezuela was in a state of economic and financial crisis. The crisis led to hyperinflation and a shortage of vital goods in the country, such as food and medicine, and also contributed to rising unemployment. Nearly 8 million Venezuelan refugees flocked to neighboring countries where the government granted them temporary residence. Javier was one of the refugees who decided to radically change his life. When the 90 days of visa-free residence in the U.S. expired, he did not want to return to his homeland, so he remained in the country illegally. Javier lived in Flushing, New York, and frequently changed his fields of activity. First, he worked for a cleaning company, then as a barista, and then as a cook and waiter in a fast food restaurant. All the time spent in the U.S., Javier kept a low profile and tried not to draw attention to himself. Friends considered him a kind, thoughtful guy who was always ready to help. In January 2018, Javier unexpectedly fell in love with a girl from a dating site. It was Valerie Reyes. He did everything to make her notice him. When it happened, Javier was ready to shout about his feelings to the whole world, wrote a lot about Valerie on social media, and from the first meeting, he was prepared never to part with his beloved again. But it turned out that Valerie was not ready for a serious relationship. When Javier suggested that the girl move in together to live as one family, he only pushed her away from him. Valerie understood that her boyfriend wanted much more from this relationship, but she herself was in no hurry to tie her life to a man. She had huge plans for the future, and marriage did not yet fit into them. Valerie quickly grew tired of Javier's constant presence and decided to end the relationship. However, the guy was not going to give up his beloved so easily and continued to call several times a day and send dozens of text messages. Valerie even had to block his access in all messengers and social networks. Norma, Valerie's mother, knew about her daughter's relationship with Javier. The woman got the impression that the guy liked to control everything and, if desired, could easily stoop to manipulation. And that's what happened. Once he used the death of his mother from cancer to make Valerie feel sorry for him and agree to a meeting. The mother's illness was never confirmed. It is possible that he was ready to do anything to get the girl back. Even with such dubious manipulations, Javier did not take no for an answer. Their actual relationship lasted less time than the period he pursued Valerie, using a variety of methods for meetings. The guy made the last attempt in September 2018, when he once again tried to contact Valerie about using her debit card data. The girl directly told him that she did not want to have anything to do with him and sent her friend to meet him. After this incident, Javier did not appear in Valerie's life, but was it the calm before the storm? Or did he really realize the futility of his attempts to get closer? This was now to be found out by the detectives handling Valerie's case. On February 11th, 2019, Javier was arrested at his rented apartment in Flushing, New York. During the interrogation, he gave several reasons why he used Valerie's debit card and withdrew money. At first, he claimed that he found her wallet on a street in Manhattan. Inside were cards and a piece of paper with the PIN code for the debit card. Javier insisted that he had not seen Valerie for about a year and was not even in the area where she lived. When the police provided the guy with evidence that he had rented a car and its location was easy to determine, Javier immediately changed his story. Now he claimed that he was near his ex-girlfriend's house, but did not see her. Admittedly, he was forced to confess by the photographs of Valerie's body in the suitcase shown by the investigator. Apparently, he still had some warm feelings for Valerie, but his story was still far from the truth. Javier said that, in fact, on the evening of January 28th, he was communicating with Valerie. The young man went to her apartment and committed the last act of passion. Although they had not seen each other for several months before that, the meeting was very stormy. They were having such a good time together that they didn't notice how they fell off the bed. Valerie fell to the floor and hit her head so hard that she stopped reacting to anything at all. At first, Javier tried to bring the girl to her senses, but she did not regain consciousness in any way, and he panicked. Then he taped her mouth shut so that Valerie would not start screaming at the most inopportune moment. He tied her hands and feet and stuffed her into a suitcase. After that, he got rid of it by throwing it into a wooded area. The police took Javier's DNA and were able to match it with a DNA sample found on the suitcase handle, as well as with a substance found under the girl's fingernails. However, the ex-boyfriend's story did not match the evidence that detectives had discovered by this time. Firstly, all of Valerie's acquaintances and friends unanimously assured that Valerie did not want to have anything to do with Javier, so she would never have voluntarily made love to him. Secondly, the forensic examination showed that the girl died of suffocation inside the suitcase due to several layers of tape wrapped around her face. If Javier's story had been true and the guy was really scared, then it is unclear why it was necessary to tie up the dead body, as he claimed, and then cold-bloodedly take the bank cards and withdraw all the accumulated funds. The young man explained his behavior by saying that he deliberately made himself visible on the ATM camera recordings so that the police would catch him sooner. After what happened, he could not forgive himself and was waiting for retribution. Here, a legitimate question arose as to why not just go to the police and confess. Given Valerie's mental state and the last conversation with her mother, it is unlikely that the girl would have wanted to make love with Javier when he suddenly appeared in her apartment that night. Why did she have multiple injuries on her face that could not be obtained from a fall? All these facts completely refuted Javier's version, but the detectives could not determine the motive that forced him to deliberately take the life of the girl whose affection he had sought for so long. In the end, the investigators came up with a possible motive for Javier's actions. On January 24, 2019, about a week before Valerie disappeared, the guy sent a text message to his new girlfriend. He complained to her that he caught his ex in his own bed with a neighbor, but this was not true, as Valerie would never have gone to Javier's house on her own. Most likely, the guy found out that Valerie had a new boyfriend. He stalked Valerie, considering her his own property,
and the appearance of a rival on the horizon infuriated the young man. As the evidence shows, here's what happened that night. On the evening of January 28, 2019, Javier rented a Honda car in Flushing, New York, where he lived, and headed to his ex's apartment in New Rochelle. He arrived there early in the morning, parked the car near Valerie's house, and put his phone in airplane mode. The police pinged his phone, and cell towers showed that Javier was within 300 feet of Valerie's home that morning, and then the phone signal disappeared. It is unknown whether Valerie let him into the apartment or if he forced his way inside, but soon after, an argument broke out between them. Javier's DNA was found in swabs taken from Valerie's chest and genitals. This DNA, along with the sample extracted from under the victim's fingernails, indicated intimate contact. Sexual intercourse did indeed take place between them, but apparently it was not completed by mutual consent, as Javier claimed. Most likely Valerie resisted as much as she could, and as a result of the struggle, scratched the attacker. The violent argument and resistance led to the girl sustaining a head injury, numerous bruises on her face, and a broken nose. When she lost consciousness from the pain, Javier wrapped her mouth and chin with several layers of tape, tied her legs and hands, and then stuffed her into a red-orange suitcase. They had bought this suitcase for a joint trip when they first started dating. Valerie was still alive when the rejected boyfriend decided to get rid of her. She suffocated from the multiple layers of tape around her mouth and chin. Her nose was broken as a result of the attack, so she simply had nothing to breathe with. After the suitcase was moved to the trunk of the rented car, Javier returned to the girl's apartment and cleaned up as best he could. That's why the police found so little evidence there. Driving away from the house, he unlocked Valerie's phone with her fingerprint and checked all the records. He was interested in who she had been communicating with after breaking up with him, but even more, he needed her bank card information. Valerie, deprived of the remaining oxygen, could no longer resist. Upon reaching Greenwich, Connecticut, Javier threw the suitcase in a secluded section of the highway, hidden from prying eyes by trees. He did this without even knowing whether Valerie was alive or dead. On the way back home, he used the girl's phone to access her banking information and then disposed of it by throwing it off a bridge into a river. Then Javier stopped at several different ATMs to withdraw money. In addition to Valerie's mobile phone from her apartment, he took her iPad and one of the pillows. Later, the young man exchanged the tablet for a new monitor for his computer. So, judging by Javier's actions, after committing the crime, he was not tormented by remorse. On February 12, 2019, Javier Enrico Docilo Rojas was charged with kidnapping resulting in death. For this crime, he faced the death penalty or life imprisonment. It took some time to bring the case to trial. Javier's defense tried to portray him as a victim, hoping that the judge would remove the death penalty from the agenda. The lawyers argued that this was the guy's first crime, committed out of jealousy. Prior to this, he had a reputation as a decent person, with no previous criminal record. His refugee status also played into the hands of the defense team. He had to leave a country that was falling apart, abandon college, and flee Venezuela. Javier arrived in the U.S. with only $600 in his pocket. He experienced depression due to separation from loved ones and got involved with illegal substances. He was a broken man who sincerely regretted his actions and understood the horrifying nature of his behavior. Fortunately for him, the lawyers reached a plea agreement, and on February 5, 2020, Javier Enrique Docilo Rojas pleaded guilty to kidnapping Valerie Reyes and actions that led to the girl's death. In court, he fully repented and said that he would never forgive himself for what he had done, and he did not even dare to beg the Reyes family for forgiveness, knowing that he did not deserve it. When Norma, Valerie's mother, took the floor and expressed in words the pain she felt at losing her daughter in her prime, Javier could not hold back his tears. He quietly sobbed in the defendant's dock. On September 23, 2021, 26-year-old Javier Enrique Docilo Rojas was sentenced to 30 years in prison for kidnapping resulting in death. Due to the fact that he was in the United States illegally,
He will be deported back to Venezuela as soon as his sentence expires. Valerie Reyes brought joy and happiness to everyone around her. The tragic death of this girl caused a wave of outrage throughout the community in which she lived her short life. Jealousy, cruelty, greed for money, all the criminal's actions do not seem accidental, committed under the influence of emotions. They were calculated too precisely. Javier knew he was going to harm Valerie even before he entered her apartment. Stealing from a person he had just taken the life of shows that he had no remorse, and all his tears in the defendant's dock were nothing more than another manipulation,